Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Marketing Mix Unmixed Ep7. Today, we have a special guest from down under, from the beautiful land of Australia, John James. John James is a marketing and branding strategist. He has over a decade of experience. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for letting me be on the show, Venkat. I've been actually following your journey as well, actually, from afar. So it's good that we finally met.
John, tell us about your career journey. How did you get started in marketing and strategy?
It's actually all I've ever done. So I formally trained at university, which I know is very rare these days. I specialized in the strategy side of marketing as opposed to maybe some of the other forms, but it did give me a good grounding in a lot of the literature. I also interned with a couple of companies while I was working as part of a scholarship program. And then I was working client side, government, agencies experience, Saatchi experience there. McCann Erickson was one of my first jobs as an AE or account executive. So handling sort of large advertising campaigns in that kind of awkward sort of initial years of the digital boom, but it was still not a thing. And then I've sort of followed that through to digital agency experience, video production, distribution firms, very much sort of steeped in that sort of SaaS building thing, and worked for SaaS companies in San Francisco as a growth manager. So I'm exposed to that growth marketing or growth function in tech, and also ran my own agency and custom dev shop for a period of time. And now I mostly just consult and build some things on the side and advise companies all around the world how to better use their funds to achieve whatever goal they want to achieve.
Interesting. In your profile, you have also mentioned that you are a champagne aficionado. Can you tell us a bit about that? As they say, somebody who can tell a good wine from bad is also genuinely good at marketing.
Well, I think it's an important point about having tastes. And I've seen a lot of people, in this data-driven world where we have access to a lot of data that maybe is not flavorsome. I think having taste and inserting humans into that filtering process of what you create and how you create in the craft, and having some kind of voice instead of being a soulless data-driven company is becoming more important. And I think along with that, some of the most interesting people I met have really good taste. But champagne, I got into that when we used to win a new client when I was running a company. So every time we won a new client, we'd go to celebrate. I'd go down to the local store and buy a bottle of champagne because, that's what you do when you celebrate. And I quickly sort of got a lot of clients and exhausted the range of champagne within that store. And then I started early days Instagram. I think it was like 2014 or something. And I was like, okay, I got to learn how to do Instagram. So I started taking pictures because, on Instagram, social media, it's all food and champagne and showing how good everyone is. So I started doing that to learn that. And then I kind of got a following, and people were like, when are you going to do an event? And that sort of led one thing to the next. But in a formal life, I was working in hospitality. So bars, very expensive bars and restaurants around the world. So that's kind of where I got that early on, I suppose.
Great. Your company is named Hybrency. Can you tell the backstory of it? Why did you name it so?
Hybrid agency. So it's just a portmanteau of those two words. I think where we're seeing things go now, I think traditionally marketing was overly reliant on just agencies to do a lot of things for them. That was the case when technical barriers existed back in the day with broadcast advertising and the production process, very skilled, highly skilled process. So you needed to outsource it. So I think a lot of the sort of pre-2000s era of marketing was very much reliant on agencies. And I've seen that be disrupted by digital mediums and digital agencies. And I think that's sort of fragmenting now with AI. It's really lowered the barriers to entry of production. So I think the future, I see it, is more of a hybrid approach between outsourced third-party specialists, then melding with some core competencies internally. And I think that is playing out as I predicted. So hence the name.
Let's talk about the serious stuff, right? What is marketing and what is marketing effectiveness according to you?
Well, it's interesting. I did a study on what is marketing around the world. I interviewed 3 groups of people, CEOs, and CFOs, so non-marketing execs who fund the function, ask them, what is marketing? I then compared that with marketers themselves, so CMOs or heads of marketing, and then also a control group from general population. And there was wild variation in the answer to that question. So I don't even want to go there, to be honest, but I mean, I see it as the function that represents the market, of which there are many, internal and external, and that is the champion of that within inside the organization. I think what form that takes really varies a lot from organization to organization, depending on the culture and what they call things. But it sort of is steeped in that sort of promotional side of things, I think, historically, for better or for worse. But I see it as a bit of a broader cultural champion, I suppose, within the organization, to stop them only thinking inside out. So sort of reorientates them from an outside in perspective. So looking at what the market wants, as opposed to just making decisions internally without that force. So it's about bringing that force of the market back into the organization.
I follow a bunch of marketing experts on LinkedIn, including you. Whenever I read posts from marketing experts like you and others, sometimes it feels like, the marketing concepts and debates are like, drawing a line on the beach, only for the next wave for it to, erase it. Some people say that, hey, there is the 4 Ps of marketing, and then there's another voice which says, no, there's nothing like that. And then there is the argument about, hey, is there really a marketing or sales funnel to begin with? And again, there's a counter argument saying that there's nothing like it. And again, there are debates like, hey, marketing creates demand and it doesn't create demand. Why do you think there's so much divergence and there is no kind of, reconciliation amongst marketeers about marketing concepts?
People who like to talk and can't execute like to discuss these things. I think social media has a role to play because it rewards this one side versus the other side. It's this dichotomy of certain debates, and that's what it feeds from, and it gets more people. It gets a lot of people just arguing about things who are not people who make senior decisions or can execute anything. The best people I know don't spend time debating these things, but I understand why it has to be done, and there's currency in going there as a commentator. But I would suggest that the problem with it is it forces like these, what I call false dichotomies. So this like black and white thinking, or one side or the other side. And generally there's very little things in life that are like or one or the other. And I think it's unrealistic to expect that. And that's why I think it's an unhealthy way to think. But hey, it's journalism basically is the short answer.
What is your take on, whether there is something such as, a marketing funnel out there?
Okay, so there's a lot of concepts like funnel, I think, is another one of them. It's like, there's a famous quote by, I think, Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger about like, all models are wrong, some are useful. So I think that applies a lot to things like frameworks. So to distill a really complex topic and how something works, it's very complex. What you try to do is you simplify creating some kind of framework, right? So a funnel is like a framework. It's wrong because it's not kind of how it works technically if you understand first principles, but is it useful to get non-marketing executives on board and thinking about, well, there's things that are at the base level when they're about to make a purchase decision, and there's other things we can do before that. I think that thinking is correct. What isn't correct is like the funnel was created by like sales people, and then it was adapted by the advertising industry to sell more advertising that was less accountable. So like once you look into the history where these things come from, you realize that a lot of the time underneath it's a vendor sales pitch wrapped up in disguise that's filtered throughout people. But when you strip it back and think, is that actually how it works? And you look at the raw data and evidence, you often find that these things that are very popular, that a lot of people talk about, just are myths. They're born from like a sales pitch, basically, or someone's TED talk or a popular commentator. They're not valid scientifically.
Understood. How would you define a brand?
A brand, it's just memories of a commercial nature. So then there's like good quality brand that leads to revenue and brand that doesn't lead anywhere. Example, I know who Trump is. So brand awareness is the thing that gets thrown around a lot as this like sort of thing that will solve all the ills of a company, but that's not true. People can be aware of you but not purchase you, or not relate to, not associate you with the thing that you're selling. So it's just awareness for awareness sake. So for example, I'm not in the US anymore, so I know who Trump is, but I'm not going to vote for him because I can't. So that's just one example, and there's many others that exist. So example, Domino's doesn't have really, there's very few restaurants that Domino's has. It's a takeout pizza place. So I know Domino's makes pizza, but I wouldn't go to Domino's for an Italian restaurant experience, for example. So that's like why the category is so specific. So brand is about memories of a commercial nature, generally the name and other sort of distinctive assets that recall that company, and then an association with the product category that that company is in and representing. And the combination of those two things can sometimes, depending on how the quality of it, be superior in selling that company's good or service. And that's as simple as it is.
Mm-hmm. Talking about brand, let's talk about one of the hottest topics in marketing of late, rebranding, right? There is this Cracker Barrel rebranding, and then there was the Jaguar rebranding. Is rebranding a good idea according to you?
Most of the time, no, is the short answer. Why is it popular is probably a more interesting answer. It's popular because a lot of the time, maybe for two reasons. Internally, the business just feeling a bit stuck. Most businesses do not grow, by the way. Like 85% on average around the world of businesses, and these are large businesses, do not grow every year incrementally. So they're sort of stuck in a holding pattern or declining. That creates appetite internally to make a change with things, whether that be a website or design, look and feel or something. So it's a very popular thing for internally people to buy into and to pursue as a project, to sort of refresh things and sort of get out of that funk that the company is in. Is it successful at lifting the numbers and talking like outcomes, financial outcomes? No. Almost always it's a complete disaster, or actually accelerates the company to go backwards because it throws out a lot of things that had equity. But is it sometimes necessary? Yes. I would just say that it's probably overused, and therefore, as you've probably seen some of these examples, it often comes from a political sort of origin, not steeped in a need from the market. And when that happens, then it increases the risk of it negatively impacting the business.
Sometimes rebranding also tells you how much people love your brand. I mean, especially if there's a huge public uproar. In the case of Jaguar and of course in Cracker Barrel, a lot of people, raised up their hands and said that, hey, don't do it. It's really a bad idea. So do you think rebranding can also give you signal how much people love your brand?
I think, we have to be careful here of like bubbles. So there's a large bubble in the advertising and marketing industry of marketers talking about marketing to other marketers. But when you ask a random sample of the population, they're like, who? Jaguar? Did they rebrand? I don't know. So like, that's the first thing I'd say about this, is that often these controversies are overblown. Often, if it's controversial, the company will lean into that controversy as a bit of a publicity boon as well. So you have to be careful of that. Sometimes it's intentionally controversial. I did see the Cracker Barrel one recently and everything. All I would say is that, again, when it comes to rebrands, you want to be careful about not throwing out existing equity that is working. So once you've got these visual distinctive assets, sometimes we're talking about a logo here, right, for whatever reason, but a rebrand is probably bigger than that. But anyway, a lot of the times the name or a logo or a font or sort of colors, whatever, right? It's really important that when people are looking to make a decision between, one provider or another, one brand or the other, that there's familiarity there. So you're not adding mental friction, or they don't recognize you at all after you do the rebrand, which is probably the worst thing. So it's really important not to change it too much. I prefer the term brand evolution. So I think you should be modifying your brand all the time. Like maybe every couple of years, let's give a bit of a tweak here and there, like small little subtle changes that go below the perception so that people still recognize it as you, but you can kind of tweak things as you go. And I think that's better than rather than these big hard cutovers, which generally come because the company is sort of in a bad state and they flip-flop from one thing to the other too hard, and it's too different, and it loses all that equity. So that's the risk.
Do you think Coca-Cola is a good example for brand evolution? I mean, if you see their logo changes from maybe 1900s till now, is that a good example?
Yeah, it's a really good example. I think, I did look at their logo changes, but yeah, it was like it was 1898 or something. It was like ages ago. Yeah, for 100 years, basically the logo has not changed. A couple of years in there where they did sort of flip-flop a bit. I think the same happens with companies like Geico as well. Very consistent. They've used the same headline basically, or a call to action for a long period of time, and it's sort of ingrained in our brains. Like, why would you go and change that? Why would you go and change this? But because they've got a new CMO and they want to put the stamp of authority on their position and do a project or whatever. But yeah, it's really dangerous. So coming back to Coke, I think it's good. They have updated things. In terms of changing the logo, they haven't really done much. They've kept the red very unique. Yeah, but I mean, they do change the designs around a tiny bit, but it always comes from this core identity that is constant. So there's tweaks around the edges. You see with the new, can design, just one example, the logo sort of moved up there, and, it's a bit more negative space there. Yeah, cool. Well, I like how they sort of modernize it without doing those hard cutovers. So I think they're a good example to look at.
You're an expert in marketing strategy. For the layman, can you differentiate what is strategy and what is tactic? How are they different?
Yeah, so I probably assigned to maybe the Richard Rommel camp here. I mean, his book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, kind of outlines what this is. He talks about the strategy kernel as being like sort of three things for it to be strategy. And this is before we get to good and bad strategy, which there's a lot. I think the term has been bastardized a tiny bit by the management consulting industry. So people think it's like this convoluted plan that happens every 12 months. That is not strategy. It really consists of like a proper diagnosis of the problem opportunity to start with. So that generally involves some kind of data points or research from the bat. So i.e. where is the signals for this in the market? Then you create like a path, a policy to follow. So that is a conscious decision about things to ignore, and that, hey, we're going to go in this direction and work within this sort of parameter. And this is our general approach to solving that problem or making most of that opportunity. And that is really interesting because you have to look at constraints and like what's happening in the market and what isn't, and capabilities and everything like that. So all those really high-end decisions where we don't have unlimited resources, we have only so many staff and so much money to spend, and our competitors are doing these things, and if we do the same, then we're not going to get yield. So all that sort of like high level discussion needs to happen. And then the last thing you do is create your action plan, which some people brand as tactics, right? The problem with that is, and action plans are really important. That's where like, hey, we're going to do this by this date, and put objectives and go, track things and assign job tasks to people, and that's the world that I think a lot of teams are in now from that sort of Kanban agile era, is that they're just doing all these tasks, right, on some kind of board or Kanban board or whatever, right? The problem with that is that in marketing, you quickly realize in an internal position that the number of requests you get and tasks is basically unlimited, right? And it was never ending. And there's always going to be more requests than there is to do things. So I think one of the key things to know if you're being strategic or not is like knowing why you're doing that thing. Like, is that connected to some sort of like larger goal or group objective that pushes the company forward in a way that the CEO and executives are looking to see and affect the earnings outcome of the company? And if it doesn't, then it's just you're doing something for no strategic reason, basically. So I think one person's strategy is another person's tactic is very true. These kind of things should cascade down, and like, but they should all come from the sort of like top core in a kind of pyramid, like an issue tree almost, but a strategy issue tree. So I'm also, when I talk about strategy, I'm sort of talking about cascading layers throughout the organization, and that's kind of what I help companies do.
If I were to summarize your words, would it be right in saying that tactics are more short-termish, whereas strategy are more long-term, and perhaps tactics can change, but strategy should not change that much?
I see where you're coming from there. I wouldn't put it that way personally, because I think, some things will stay the same, but I mean, if the market changes really suddenly, you have to adapt, right? And you have to change. So there are times when we'll completely turn course and scrap whatever we're doing before. So I think strategy is more like the reasoning process and the discipline through which you make decisions to solve and achieve a goal, right? And that will change over time. So I get where you're coming from, but I think thinking in these binary terms of like strategy and tactics is kind of like, doesn't really get you anywhere because like you might have a strategy plan, but that looks tactical to the person above you. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying about these cascading layers. Like, oh yeah, well, we gave you 5% marketing and we just need you to raise revenue, right? We don't care how you do it. And they look at all these initiatives that you're doing and they're, all right, we've got the strategy plan on how to do it. And they're like, oh, that's just a list of initiatives. That's tactical, right? And then, so like, it really depends on your viewpoint, is my point, like where you are in the hierarchy of the organization.
Okay, understood. Are there any success stories that you can speak to, with regards to how you implemented a particular tactic or a strategy for any one of your clients?
Well, yeah. I mean, how much time do you have? Do you have an
We have,
industry or
don't
type
worry.
of product that you're interested in, or something I've done recently,
A-
or?
Anything.
Yeah, so okay, we'll use an example of the company that I'm doing some fractional work for right now, where I'm in the office. We were doing a strategy that was trying to achieve, like a revenue outcome, right? So it's a B2B company, services company, very high-end sort of trust decision-making process. So it's a core sort of supplier of any company's sort of vendor list, right? And they were doing some investments in some channels and some applying their marketing dollars in this sort of direction. So it was all like, send traffic to a website, convert that, put into a sales CRM, some salesperson will pick that up and then try to sell them something. And a lot of that was based on this, I would say, pre-2022 thinking of like inbound marketing kind of strategy, where that's what you kind of do to expand and grow a B2B business. But that's not how sales decisions were made in this category. So I did a bit of research with the buyers. So again, starting with that research phase, and I found out quickly that the way they make purchase decisions about this supplier is they just ask a friend or look at word of mouth, or it's within their sort of community that they ask, oh, who's good at doing that, because it's such a high risk decision that they and they don't understand it because it's very technical, that that's how they kind of created their shortlist of, in the RFP. So they didn't really do the Google searching thing and fill out forms or whatever. So that whole way of trying to create revenue outcomes using market budget for this company was just completely wrong. So it wasn't steeped in any sort of, basically someone had bought into what the agency was selling them, or what HubSpot says, instead of like how sales actually made. So we reoriented the strategy around investment in different ways to affect new buyers, and that is turning out pretty effective. So I can't say what it is, but it's not
Understood.
based on sort of website lead gen.
Great. Yeah, so you kind of diagnose and also prescribe what the brand should do. Basically, you would be obviously leveraging some kind of marketing measurement tools. What are your views on, marketing attribution techniques like MMM and MTA?
Yeah, sure. I think, the answer to this question is really simple. Like, again, I just want to be clear. I consult to CEOs, CFOs, like non-marketing executives mostly, right? About how to make the most out of their funds that they have for growth or marketing, whatever you want to call it. So it's a kind of different discussion than perhaps what a marketer might be sort of selling to somebody else. But what they want to see is like, hey, we spend this money, what do we get for it? So this question of like, what is the ROI, or what did it do, is something common that you need to be able to answer. And it's very simple at its heart. It's like, we spend all this money, what incremental uplift do we get for that money, right? Now, how you measure that becomes kind of complex. Depends on your sales cycle, right? The length of that and everything. So if you look at very short sort of windows, or you look at digital signals, so in the case of this client, sales weren't created through digital marketing, right? So there's no point having an MTA system, because it's just not how it works. I think MTA was pretty effective back in the SaaS era before privacy crackdowns and everything. And it's a good kind of way of formally doing it if we're only looking at digital influence and digital channel influence with trackable sort of events or clicks, basically. But it sort of really doesn't encompass some of the sort of soft supporting or less obvious channel investments that may create explicit clicks and that. So like, it's flawed. What's the other thing? MMM is really good, but you do need to combine that with, well, there's certain thresholds first. You need to be spending enough in certain of these channels. You need to have your data like quite clean and good quality, which a lot of firms kind of struggle with in the first place. But it's a better way to think about it, because it's like a model looking at like multiple things based on some kind of mathematically sound principles, which is really, really good. But you do need to do some experiments on the side and still look at per channel. So whether it's attribution or some other reporting, like per channel optimization as well, which, obviously MMM doesn't always cover. So I think you probably need to look at, proper experimentation or incrementality testing, right? You probably need to have MMM or some sort of model in the background that is way more advanced than MTA. And then you need to have sort of like per channel attribution as well. And if you kind of mix all those three together, you're a good base. But if anyone's using MTA or digital attribution only, and they're doing like multiple channels and they're spending like a somewhat significant amount of money, then I would say that's not a good approach, and you should probably
Yeah, totally agree on that. We also follow a triangulation approach. I mean, we have MMM and then we have experiments and then we have the causal experiments. We kind of don't do MTA. I mean, if client requests it, we do it. But as you said, for the points, for example, back when the privacy was not a concern, MTA worked, but now it's not the case. You talked about incrementality, right? The word incrementality has become kind of like a buzzword of late. Everybody is using the word incrementality. What's your opinion on this?
I mean, it's like when people use the word ROI, like what they mean is like financial payback, like officially. So we can get technical about these things, but like I think it doesn't matter sort of what they say, it's like what they mean beforehand. And that's what I'm saying. Like there's a baseline. If we don't do anything, like our business is going to do X, or maybe it just goes down slowly over time, or whatever the shape of the curve is. I don't care. It's more about then if I do something, what is that change above baseline, right? So for me, that's kind of like what we're meaning by incrementality here, right? How sure are you that that only came from that initiative that you just did? That's a nuanced discussion, right? But it's a very simple test, I think, that we can use to get early signals about whether that thing contributes above the norm or not, how much it does, and what are the diminishing returns of that. It's a very complex discussion, but we won't go into it. But like, at its heart, I think to answer the marketing measurement question, that should be what you should be doing with your marketing budget. If it's not creating some incremental effects above baseline, then you're basically just not spending money wisely. And I would be very I'd be at sort of alert stations and advising the executives that, hey, this isn't working. So look into it.
Let's talk about dichotomies in marketing. I know we earlier alluded to it. What are your opinions on, firstly, brand marketing versus performance marketing?
Oh, well, look, if you look at the history, which I'm sure you probably read because I've written about it, but like first there was the direct response versus or sales versus marketing sort of chasm. Then there was the direct response marketing versus the brand advertising kind of schism that happened back in the 50s, 60s. Then the latest iteration of that just happened to be sort of digital, which was labeled performance, which was the name of a popular reseller of Google Ads back in the 90s, right? Which is where the term kind of originates from. Then it created this whole schism between digital agencies versus traditional ad agencies. Ad agencies sort of went back into the whole, well, we're going to double down on brands, emotional storytelling, and large format video and TV and all that kind of thing, right? And then the digital agencies just went, oh, you guys are wrong. Like, you can't even measure anything, which is kind of true. They're both kind of right. But there's this sort of divide that's happened that I don't think is a healthy way to think about how channel investments and marketing works in general, specifically advertising communication channels. I think I've seen performance campaigns have a branding effect. I've seen branding campaigns, like core branding campaigns, have a really good sales effect. And I can pretty much dismantle anyone's argument that these two things exist. I would think about it that there are certain channels that have pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses, certain channel niches that will have a clearer, shorter term effect. They'll be more obvious, and other ones that are a bit of a longer burn and sleeper sort of channel investments that will boost everything else up, but not be easily measurable or very explicit in the way that they do that. And that's why you need to have really high quality, sophisticated measurement systems, because there's a lot of hidden things that will have a positive effect that won't be captured if you're only using sort of one piece of the measurement pie. And I think another thing I'd say is that a lot of firms sort of start exhausting that direct response or performance marketing kind of approach, and they hit this diminishing return that sort of causes this, oh, we need to now invest in brand marketing. This is kind of where this thing comes from. But I mean, they've been doing brand marketing since day one, if you think about it. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think the thing that gets lost in this argument is that there's a difference between like building brand and brand advertising. So everyone thinks you build brand via brand advertising, and it's not true. There's many ways you can do it. So I think that causes people to just sort of fall for this agency sales pitch, I would call it. So yeah, it's not a good way to think about it.
So for any brand, should they get started with brand marketing first, or should they get started with performance marketing?
Okay, I mean, this is where it gets complex because, like, I don't know what stage of how much money they have, all this kind of thing. But I would say that when a firm is younger, they should really be exhausting that direct response sort of like advertising initiatives first and foremost, and you should keep that going for probably the entire history of the company, but you will hit diminishing returns, right? Example, and when I say like the company even at very early stages is probably doing brand, is because yeah, you're creating like some kind of look and feel, right? Like visual branding assets. You are, as the founder of the business or the owner of the business, kind of the personal brand that represents the trust behind the company that is probably not very well known, but they'll trust you because they kind of know you and your connections and stuff. So you kind of are brand proxy in a way. And then if you do things like podcasts like this, like, is this branding or performance? Like, this is a really good example. If someone that listens to this and then reaches out to you and goes, hey, I really like, that thing got me thinking, Venkat, I think we need to get an MMM platform. Like, is that performance or is that brand?
I think it's a bit of both. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. Another example, that Super Bowl ad with the DVD logo. So it was a QR code or something. I think it was Coinbase, whatever, on the Super Bowl. It was going around. You can do that. You could scan it with your phone, and then you get like $10 free credit, whatever the thing was. Like that was a direct response mechanism inside what many people would term a brand ad because it's on TV. So is that brand or performance? And then if I didn't have a QR code, is that brand or performance? Like, you see how silly this kind of discussion is?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Does performance marketing? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Another example. Many people think Google Ads is just search ads is performance, right? If I only had an ad campaign that focused on my brand name, so exact match brand name, brand match, is that branding or performance? If I use a category sort of question like what are the different marketing measurement models out there, kind of thing, and I focus on that word, is that brand or performance? And I take them to like a blog page talking about the different models. Or is performance best MMM targeting keyword? Like, where is the line exactly?
Yeah,
this is why it's not a good discussion to have.
Yeah, really interesting questions. So something all of us can ponder upon, and I'm sure that you will have varied answers for it. My next question was about performance marketing. Does performance marketing also enhance branding, so as to speak, or brand equity of a brand?
So again, let's come back to a definition of what a brand is. Like for me, it's like, we know through some of the work that research institutions have done that probably one of the best proxies for brand growth is market penetration. So X number of customers within a defined category, right? And if you have more than another one, you're a bigger brand than the others, and that's pretty true. And you sort of get that brand halo effect as a result of owning the most customers in that category. How do you get there? I think there's many ways you get there, but the most obvious way you get there is by like selling and acquiring more customers. How do you do that is the next question. Well, there are different ways you do that. You could do a distribution deal. You could do a sales promotional trial thing that then converts into a paying customer. You could brand advertise for a long period of time on whatever channel. You could do Google Ads. Like, if you are getting increased market penetration, you are increasing the size of your brand. So that's why I think people get confused, like growing a brand, what a brand is, versus how do you grow a brand, the different channels you may use. I think varies from one company to another. Yes, does performance marketing, however you want to define that, grow a brand? Yeah, it does. If I acquire a customer out of it, for sure. I'm increasing my market penetration. So by proxy, I'm increasing brand.
Since we started talking about brand marketing and performance marketing, let's talk about Les Bennett's 60-40 rule. How do you see this playing out? Have you seen brands adopting this particular rule?
What I would say about some of these famous marketing books is that I have never been in an executive meeting where someone has said, oh, because this person, this famous marketer wrote a book on, and this is the way it is. I've never seen them go, oh, okay, well, that's sorted then, sure. Every time they go, who was that person? Why should I trust them? Like, what are they selling us? So I think I'd be very careful about buying into the narratives in some of these popular books. Directionally true, should we be allocating some sort of proportion to maybe longer burn, harder to measure, but valuable activities, whether you call that brand marketing or not? Yes, we should be doing that since day one. In the early days of a business, should we be probably spending less on that than the other stuff that actually gets customers in the door? Sure. As your company gets bigger and more sophisticated, and like I said, you're hitting diminishing returns and all that stuff, and this brand halo effect starts to take over, is it worth investing more in that and a bit less in that other thing? Yes. So yeah, this ratio will kind of change over time. If I took a big strata chunk of the population and sort of like crunch the numbers, I would probably see some sort of like average split, right, between those kind of Pareto ratios. Yeah. Especially at the big end of town, it's going to go towards more of that brand thing. But like, again, I think what's really not clear is how people define what is brand marketing and what is performance marketing. And I've asked that question and I get a lot of varied answers. There's no clear definition. So while in that book, they do a pretty good job of defining it, I think marketers haven't read that and they sort of go into these different camps without really understanding exactly what it is.
Understood. Since we have talked about Les Bennett 60/40, we have to talk about Byron Sharp's How Brands Grow. What's your take about how brands grow?
Yeah, look, a lot of the research I do is valid and replicable and has been repeated in many studies over and over and over. What can I say? Like, how do I use that knowledge to grow a brand? Well, that's really difficult, right? I think directionally, if you follow a lot of the principal tenets in that book, you will be a lot better than other people. The problem is that this book was written as like it was like a thing they would use for sales enablement for clients, right? So they would do training if they got a new client, Best Institute, that would sort of use this handbook, then they could spread it around so that once they had been bought as a vendor, then everybody else sort of became on sync between why we're making decisions, why we're working this different way than we're used to, right? And that's where the book originates from, right? And it wasn't really written as like this marketing Bible. So it, I think what's missing in a lot of that is the political realities of the position, which I would say like is the majority of what takes like a CMO's kind of like tenure and day-to-day life. And I think how things work scientifically and how things work in the real messy world that's full of politics and different incentive programs is a very different kind of thing. So I like what they do. I think it's a lot of it's scientifically valid. But then when you go to apply that in your day-to-day work, I think, again, like you're not going to get very far by going, hey, well, Byron Sharp wrote this book and this is the rule, blah, blah, blah. Like you still have to explain it to the decision makers. And then how do you execute on that is quite hard as well. So the budget constraints, all those realities of working in the role. That person, by the way, has not worked in a marketing role. So I think that says everything.
Okay. Let's talk about the effectiveness of some of the world's famous ads, starting with Apple's 1984 Super Bowl ad. Marketeers are divided on this. Some of the marketeers say that, hey, it is the best ad ever. But then there are other marketers who say that, hey, it didn't have the effect it intended to. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, Steve Jobs got fired after that ad. So why did he get fired? The product didn't sell. Why didn't the product sell? Lots of reasons, mostly pricing and some really bad product decisions. The ad got a lot of, I would say it was a famous director, Ridley Scott. It got a lot of write-up in the industry. So a lot of advertising people were talking about it, but it really didn't achieve the outcomes, so much so that he got fired. So how is it the best ad in the world? I think it's a disaster. So I don't know. Like, it's very strange.
Well, marketers say that it helped Apple position itself as a rebel, innovative brand, and that's what the ad served. And people are talking about that ad even till this day. So doesn't that indicate that it was a success?
I don't know. I think it's open for debate, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, as we know, if Byron Sharp is true, then you gain brand size and strength by market penetration. By not selling in computers for a number of years and the company going backwards for the next 10 years through many reasons, I would say that brand was not successful. So yeah, that ad was a failure.
Let's talk about a more recent phenomenon. This is not particularly an ad, but it's more like a documentary. I'm pretty sure you must have heard about the Formula One's Drive to Survive
Yes.
documentary on Netflix. I mean, there is a lot of evidence that it did kind of create new audience, especially in the North American market. Do you think it had an impact?
Look, I have to see the data. Anecdotally, though, from what I've observed, I think it was a very clever content marketing strategy that they executed very, very, very well. Could it have not been popular? Yes, right. But whoever executed it did a really good job of creating this story and narrative and really focusing on the people, which are the drivers and all the other people. So the kind of that personality thing, which is the reason we watch shows, to be honest. Like, again, they'll write the first season a really good plot, a really good writing, and then it all becomes about the characters, and then we fall in love with the characters, right? Or we hate that person, we like that person, we need to see that person talk again. Like those kind of things that would sort of keeps us watching, and they did that very, very well. I did see some graphs about increasing viewership, like visitation and viewership of the F1 post that campaign, that series, which is still ongoing. I think, is it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think arguably it's probably helped them a lot, evidenced by the popularity in North America, where F1 was only sort of once a year.
Exactly.
Now what was it?
3 races at least in USA.
Yeah, now I'm seeing all these sort of celebrities, US celebrities that would like completely not go to F1 and now go to F1 races. So they've done a very good job of that. Previous to that, it was very much about the racing and technical racing, right? And now they're creating drama out of it, and it's a piece of entertainment. And I think it's a really good example of content marketing done well. By the way, content marketing versus what most people think content marketing are two different things. Like that is an example of content marketing. So yeah, the blogs and social media posts and stuff is not really content marketing.
Understood. Yeah, I mean, talking about F1, they have now 2 US companies. I think one was Haas, and now Cadillac is also going to come into 2026. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just a shame though that it's about petrol like ICE engines, when the eventual sort of like shift is really to electric vehicles. But it just doesn't sound very good. I've seen the E1 race. What's the electric?
E1 Sports. Yeah,
E1 Sports, and it's just like it's just weird.
It's very silent.
It doesn't have the pull either. It's just I don't get it. So yeah, I don't know, long term, maybe it's going to be a hard ask, but anyway, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, maybe good for environment, but not good for TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Given the previous 2 examples, right? Do you think marketing creates demand?
Does it create demand? I mean, what is demand? What do you mean by demand? I don't know. This term gets used a lot, but what are we meaning by demand?
Yeah, so this is a particular topic that marketers often throw around, and some people say that, hey, marketing doesn't create demand, but people say marketing does create demand. I mean, if you take the example of F1, there wasn't much of a demand existing in USA at least, but post this, Drive to Survive show, a lot of, new demands were created.
Okay. I mean, the word sort of comes from this like SaaS growth sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these words has come from, it's always like some sort of marketing with a word before or after, right? And it's just the new thing. Growth marketing, demand gen, lead gen, what does all this stuff mean? I get why these names are created, because it sounds good. Like, hey, we'll do this demand generation campaign. Like, oh, that sounds good to non-marketing people, right? They go, oh, yeah, we want demand. Yeah, of course. We're in demand. We're a big brand. So I get it. I think the question here you're trying to allude to is that can marketing create more sales effect than would otherwise be the case? Yeah, obviously, but it depends how you do it. The other thing is that we know that in certain product categories, there is a sales cycle. There's a number of people at any one time that are sort of in that decision-making mode to switch brands or stay with the incumbent, right? And that is a pretty fixed percentage in your category. To affect that above and beyond those averages is very difficult. So can your marketing create more demand above those averages? Yeah, potentially, but it's very rare. And you have to be extremely good. You have to probably expand to other, what do we call CEPs or subcategories within a larger category to get those additional people. And as your business sort of exhausts that one pool within that subcategory, they have to go to the next subcategory, the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one. And that's kind of how your brands expand in this sort of very non-linear sort of fashion, this sort of like oil well analogy, I call it. So it's very messy, and there's sort of like there's overlapping sort of oil wells, if you know what I mean, of different pools of customers. And that's the way you should kind of think about this stuff. So yeah, there are examples where a sort of a marketing initiative has sort of like repositioned or created a new product within the existing lineup that has sort of gone out to this new pool and captured a huge percentage of it. But again, to switch all those people from an incumbent to you is somewhat constrained by those in-market people and the ratio of in-market versus out-of-market people at any one point in time. So yeah, when you listen to people like Dale Harrison, he's very right on this, but I understand why the term is used.
Great. Let's talk about one of the most exciting topics of late, that is this AI summarized results. Google has come out with this AI overview. Do you think it has fundamentally changed the landscape of search?
Yes. I mean, they've had zero-click answers for quite a while now. They've been sort of like rolling out, but now it's even more prominent, taking up a larger space on that sort of search results page. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of companies that are sort of very tied to search marketing, and it's really hard to get them sort of out of that mindset and the way they execute. I wouldn't be investing much in search. It's sort of like it's on its way down. It has been for a period of time, and now these AI summaries, whether it be Gemini or other LLMs, are definitely cannibalizing a lot of, I would say, high intent, or making that sort of comparison thing, like, hey, what is a good software within this category? I don't need to go to G2 or some of those review sites and sort of look at a category and be sort of analyzed by that. I didn't need to go to like 15 sites. I can get into one summary, you know what I mean, without even moving. So yeah, when it comes to those brand comparison questions, then yeah, I think you increasingly, if you don't have really strong, I would call brand signals, which search engines have been using for a long period of time, and it's even going further that way, I think, with these Gemini AI answers as well. So I think your brand signals in market are more important than ever, and more important than the content or the backlinks.
Talking about signals, I have worked previously on intent signals. I mean, that's another controversial topic in marketing, whether there is such a thing called as an intent signal. But if you look at how people are searching for things nowadays, I believe there is a lot more intent behind it. Earlier, it used to be like, hey, gifting options, but now people are like, hey, it's my wife's birthday, I would like to gift her something, give me some suggestions, right? So it's like it has become more intent rich, context rich. Do you think LLMs have changed the way we search on the internet?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with what some other sort of tech people have said recently around that whole web legacy sort of web-based era is over, I think. But there's a lot of people who have sort of grown up in that world, so it's very hard for them to sort of move on. That whole, like I was saying before, like I go to a search engine, I type in something, I look at these different websites, I compare them, I put into an RFP, like blah blah blah. That's how I sort of get a vendor. Like that whole process is changing rapidly. And yeah, you're right. I don't need to do 14 information searches before I do that search that says what is a good vendor for XYZ. You know what I mean? Like I don't need to do all that pre-research. I can do it all into one prompt. Like, hey, you're an agent, do some research on like the top 5 companies in India, Australia, the US within this category, figure out sort of what the pricing are, or come back to me with like a list of your top 3 kind of thing. Like that used to be days maybe of research, or like someone's job, or some junior intern was given the task by the boss to find a solution to this problem, right? Like now you can just do it in one prompt or one window. So that's really changed the game of how we may allocate our resources through digital channels as a marketer.
You had penned a very insightful article on LinkedIn stating that earlier publishers used to kind of game this SEO thing by publishing a lot of blogs and everything. But now they have lost all this power courtesy AI overview, right? Now people kind of don't have this voting power. Earlier, if you had more of these backlinks, that would mean that that particular website had more credibility. But now you're just left at the whims of an algorithm, which kind of randomly decides whether your page shows up on the AI overview or not. Do you think this will be bad for publishers, and what's the way out?
It already is. If you look at publishers, yeah, they're losing on both fronts: search, referral traffic, and they're also losing on social media. So if you put a hyperlink in there, they're frequently limiting the reach and exposure of any of that. And you're seeing that really hampering legacy journalistic sites and mastheads, news websites, that kind of thing. I would not want to be investing in any of those businesses right now. And LLMs have just further reduced the barriers to entry in creating these articles, on the fly, automatically, without that friction of hiring a journalist and that kind of thing. So it's been completely commoditized. In terms of the SEO side of things, creating all these blog posts and inner pages would, in the aggregate, create lots of traffic, answer queries. And then the thought was, well, then we get all this traffic, and a portion of that will be sort of high sales intent, or, we can kind of nurture these leads if they sign up to newsletter or whatever it was, right? What we're seeing based on data that I've looked at is that there's the homepage is basically the page now, and there's very limited sort of juice going to those any inner pages, right? And that, I think, is also a result of that, but also those brand signals are really being ratcheted up in terms of the determinant of who ranks and where and who gets mentioned. So things like citations, publications, and the publicity articles. So there are a lot of directories and other sort of signals that big brands will get by virtue, not through the means of traditional SEO, just organically via being a big brand. Certain things will be out there. Partnerships on other people's pages will be mentioning this big brand. Journalists will be writing about them. These people will be appearing at conferences and stuff like that as speakers. So all these brand signals are super important for letting search LLMs know, who's big and who isn't. And it's very hard to fake that. You can't fake it by just creating lots of page blog posts anymore. So yeah, that's what I'd say about SEO. Yeah.
As a marketing strategy expert, what would be your strategy to brands like them who are losing out on traffic currently because of AI overview?
Diversify what channels you invest in and how you generate demand or sales, or however you want to call it, or whatever goal you're optimizing for. Every sort of channel initiative has its pros and cons, like I said before, and longevity, and goes through sort of phases of yield, I would call it. So maybe something's very new, TikTok videos back in 2019, huge yield if you got on early, but now good luck trying to get 1 million views, off the bat without, a history of those quality signals. I think the same goes for search. There was a yield, there was a boom, and we've been coming off for a long period of time, and it's just really accelerated the last couple of years with these LMs and AI coming into the market for free. So I would be looking at layering on all your other channels. So as one channel hits sort of diminishing returns, the yield sort of comes down like this. You want to add the next curve, the next curve, and the next curve, and it goes sort of up like that to sustain your growth trajectory. That requires more investment, different skill sets often. So it is a very awkward transition, but you should be sort of looking at it like yield curves and layering those on. So get started on something else is my advice as soon as you can.
Great. Last question, John. Any books or resources you would recommend to marketeers?
Yeah, read. I mean, I deal with more sort of senior execs on this who are a bit more commercially minded. I would recommend they read non-marketing books. So I think sometimes the hidden reason why the things you're proposing, the frustrations you're experiencing in your role happen is because of the CFO and other sort of legal risk people being in the ear of the CEO, who then filters down that communication back to you. And you don't understand why they're not jumping on board with these investments or the ideas you have. And you need to really understand why that is the case. And it helps to understand what those roles are like and how those people think. And these are, I say, more intelligent, more educated people than the average marketer. So get some finance training behind you, understand legal risk and insurance risk and things like this, and constraints. So I would be reading things like, Charlie Munger's Almanac. I'd be reading things like The Great Mental Models by Farnham Street Blogs, Shane Parrish, I think it is, about how consultants think and, risk decision trees and all these kind of concepts that you can use. I think the worst you could do is read marketing and just popular marketing industry books. I'd rather read something like Byron Sharp's than anything else. If that sort of puts it in context. Yeah.
Great. John, this has been wonderful. Thanks for your time. So many insights shared, and I'm sure, the marketing audience is going to love it. Thanks for your
Yeah, no
time.
worries. If there's any specific questions as well, just reach out. If you're listening to the show, reach out to yourself or me, and I can always answer those.
Definitely. Thank you, John.
Cheers.